Michael Jackson's Thriller is the best-selling album of all time. But apart from what you hear on the radio, has anyone listened to it in recent times? Good morning, it's Ben and Al here from Indie Minders, and today we're going to go through Michael Jackson's Thriller, the album, given its 40 years. And to give you a bit of a rundown of this, it probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but in 1982, Michael Jackson, it's fair to say, was still an emerging pop star. He was the most talented of the Jackson brothers, no doubt, but he was tic-tagging an emerging solo career with the work of the Jackson 5. Off the Wall, 1979, that's his first adult album. He felt a little bit slighted by the fact that it didn't win a Grammy, and he wanted to double down with his next album, and that he did. So he really put down a lot of killer, no filler, 9 songs in total. 7 of those 9 songs ended up being released as a single over 12 months. It's really fascinating to see over this day and age. What's also fascinating is the first single chosen was The Girl Is Mine, the Paul McCartney duet, which in my opinion is a kind of a second tier type of song compared to Beat It, Billie Jean and Thriller itself. Thriller was actually released 12 months, almost 12 months after the release of the album. So that in itself is really fascinating. We were in a different time there, certainly. This is the 40th anniversary. There's a super deluxe edition that is about to be released. So what you'll get with that is a double CD. So the first CD will, of course, be from the Thriller album. The second will contain a number of outtakes and demos, a lot of which did end up resurfacing on albums and tracks in the future after the release of Thriller. So, Al, good morning to you, mate. I want you to start just with reflecting on the album. And we haven't listened to it a ton over the years. We've certainly listened to the songs, but I'd love your initial thoughts on what you saw of it.
Yeah, first of all, good morning, mates. Look, at this album takes us back 40 years, and I was only 1 at the time, and I believe you would have just turned about 18, mates. Look, I am really interested to have this conversation around the album Thriller because it's the first time I've actually listened to it from start to finish. Of course, I was a fan, like many of us, of the 3 singles that I remember, of course, being Billie Jean, Beat It and Thriller. One of my favourite tracks is, of course, Beat It, which featured on the film Back to the Future 2, that classic scene where Michael J. Fox is about to be smashed by Biff Tannen, and as he rises like this, the song's in the background. It's just absolutely fantastic and memorable. Look, in terms of the question, is it a solid body of work? I think it's an open conversation between the fans and people who have just kind of listened to his music over the years. I think the deeper cuts off the album I wasn't really a fan of. The first 3 songs, actually, even including the title, the first single, which features Paul McCartney, I wasn't really that into. The 3 tracks that I was into, of course, Thriller, which later became an absolute classic MTV video going for 14 minutes, I think is an absolute game changer and changed MTV and music film clips forever, and that's credited and spoken by many artists since, including Prince and R. Kelly. Now, in terms of the other tracks past Billie Jean, I wasn't really that into either, mate. It was a bit of a disappointment, to be honest, but I think what makes this such a good album was the breaking of the barriers between black and white music, and purposely including people like Paul McCartney to feature on songs, as well as, of course, Eddie Van Halen on the song Beat It. I'd be interested in your thoughts, mate, because I believe you hadn't really listened to the album from start to finish either.
No, I didn't. And look, I like to reflect on probably the legacy of the album. I mean, the guy was accused of a number of things over his life, and I guess we're not here to cast any aspersions about that. But what we will say is that he was certainly an eccentric dude, right? And I think that the public probably separate the man between the post 1984 Michael Jackson and the pre 1984, and I just think that even despite and irrespective of what he was accused of, the album itself is seen in such a brilliant light, and that's testament to the fact that we still hear the songs on the radio. The radio stations, especially in Australia, haven't banned any Michael Jackson songs. So I think that because of that, that's what's happened. But I think that if the album was released post 1984, after he got accused of all of these things, I'd be very interested to understand whether we'd be still hearing a lot of these tracks. My gut feel would be no. But of course, I guess with what he had been accused of, I think there is a little bit of it has been a little bit tainted, I guess, over the years, but I don't think it has been quite as much as it could have been. So, Al, probably there's a final word for you. If you're a general music fan, would you recommend this album to that person? I mean, given that there's a ton of really classic albums out there, from the Beatles, the Pink Floyd, a lot of rock bands out there, which is really what we generally listen to. Would you recommend Thriller?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My kind of rule of thumb is, would you hand this album down to your son or daughter to listen to? Many bands like Pink Floyd and all these other kind of classic artists that my father got me into, I of course would hand down to the next generation. The reason why I would say that this is probably worth definitely handing down to the next generation is the fact it is the highest selling album of all time. And we've got to question, well, why is that? And my view and my kind of perception of why it's the highest selling album of all time in such a short period, within 12 months, it became 30 million physical media sales. So you imagine what it would be doing in terms of that with, pre-Spotify and all that kind of stuff. So I think, yes, I would be handing this down to the next generation, but I would have a disclaimer around, you're not going to have every single track as a killer track, which was the intention of Michael Jackson. I think there's 3 or 4 absolute standout tracks that have lasted the test of time and are just absolutely fantastic. He smashed mirrors, in terms of being able to break that barrier between black and white in the music industry, and I think that should be celebrated, mate. What do you think?
No, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Look, I think that, I think this is definitely, if you're an R&B fan, this is definitely one of these foundational records that you'd be probably advising people to listen to. I probably do think, though, that if you're a fan of rock music, this is probably maybe not the type of album for you. But I thought that in general, it was a fascinating exercise that we did go through. So that was the 40th anniversary of Michael Jackson's Thriller. That wraps up another episode of Indie Miners. Please look to subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, and let us know if there's an album you would like us to look at. So until next time, bye for now, and thank you for watching.